Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this professional development opportunity hosted by the Maine Department of Education. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the department. I am very happy and excited to introduce and host my three colleagues from the Georgia Department of Education. Today, our featured speaker will be Joy Hatcher, talking about getting more bang for your buck in read alouds and social studies inquiry for grades 6 through 2. The session started on Tuesday. This trio of sessions started on Tuesday with Joanne Wood talking about kind of upper elementary read alouds. Yesterday we had Jennifer Zumberis talking about K2 read alouds, and we're going to cap off the entire series with Joy today talking about read alouds for 612, because yes, as you may or may not know, you can do read alouds in social studies for your older kids as well. I'm happy to say that this was not new for me. We used to read Dr. Seuss with my sociology kids, and we'd talk about racism and inequities and all those different types of stuff. And there was always those kids who were more than happy to come sit around the chair on the floor like they were in kindergarten. So I think there is some of that young child spirit in us all. So without further ado then, again, I'm going to turn it over to the amazing and wonderful colleagues and friends from the Georgia Department of Education, with Joy Hatcher leading us today.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for coming to hang out. These things are always better with people. They tend to be a little boring if you don't have anyone to attend. Welcome, and I hope you have enjoyed your trip to the beach, which is as close as we'll get for a minute. Before I get started, I always want to invite people to follow us on social media. Our Twitter and Facebook, we send about the same message. The only difference is length, but we share a lot of free resources and highlights that you can use for your classroom. And then our Instagram is a teacher takeover. So even if you don't have an Instagram account, make one. You don't have to post. Just go look through all our stuff. And you can mine great ideas from teachers around the state. Each week a different teacher takes over the account and then posts the wonderful and amazing things they're doing in their classroom and in their school. So it's a great place to steal ideas. It's on hiatus until the fall, but there's still great things for you to look at. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about inquiry and read alouds, how they fit together. We're going to talk about some tips for integrating them, some specific examples that I've used. I'm going to share with you a ton of books, and if we don't get to all of them, that's okay, because I sent Joe the PowerPoint, and you can peruse through them. Where to find additional titles, and then feedback. And that, I asked my mom for a picture of someone reading to me when I was a child, so that's me at some age with Disney. Story has always kind of been a part of my life, and so it was natural for me to use read alouds in my high school classrooms. I have to admit I didn't start off that way. When I transferred from a gifted magnet school to an alternative school, I found that read alouds were a great way to hook even high school kids, because they were accessible and they summarize very complex concepts in a combination of pictures and words. So I have learned a lot more since I got to the DOE and started working with Joanne. But one of the things that we tried to do is explain, particularly to high school people, how read aloud. So this slide is a handout that Joanne created for us called the Look For Us document, which is basically the elements of inquiry that are included in the C3 frameworks, but in a more teacher and user-friendly way. And if you look, using essential questions, speaking, writing, illustrating, reading, and listening, which are what the students are doing throughout the class, analyzing sources, giving them opportunities to have a civic and civil discourse, disciplinary thinking, all of those things can be done with literature. And what I love picture books the most for is their ability to allow me to focus on visual literacy. So have any of you, I'm going to just put this question out there and I'm going to click while you type, but how many of you already use read alouds in your middle and high school classrooms? And what do your kids think about that? How many of you already use it and what do your kids think about that? Okay. So this is the process that I go through when I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to use a read aloud for a particular unit or lesson. The first thing I do is I look at the book and I say to myself, what does it offer me that I can't do with the textbook, that I can't do with a primary and secondary source? And that's going to be how I determine to use the book. And then I make sure I connect it to connecting themes and enduring understandings. You guys, I'm sure, are familiar with the connecting themes in the C3 frameworks. On the left, this image over here are the connecting themes and enduring understandings that we use in Georgia, which is, there are only 10 in the C3 frameworks, or that NCSS published rather, but we have kind of expanded those out and separated some of those big ideas. So it's conflict and change, belief and ideals, movement migration. I'm coming from an AP World History background as well. And so a lot of these are those thinking skills that we're looking for in AP. So I connect the book to one or two of the connecting themes. And then from there, I develop a good essential question. And we use McTighe and Wiggins' book called Essential Questions for development of our EQs. And then I create the task from it. So why do I want to use the book? What need does it fulfill? What connecting theme does it fit with? Not just the standard, but the connecting theme, because that way I can stretch it across units and between grade levels. Then I develop the EQ and create a task. So,
Roy,
yes.
can I share with you from the
Yes,
chat?
please.
We have lots of people who are using read alouds. Leslie says almost daily in grade 6 and they love it.
Yes.
Stacy, Cynthia, 7th grade, they love it. Most of them like it. And then a lot of teachers read aloud during SWR time. I'm not sure what SWR time is, but use it especially with lower level or primary sources. They seem to like it, and groups like it. With 8th graders, they love it. They all crowd around the floor around me. 5th grade. When I first did it, they looked so surprised, but then clapped at the end. Wow, Cindy, that's what you want when you're
That's awesome.
teaching. I used during 8th grade writing. They loved it. Every day when they came in the library, they asked if there would be story time. Sometimes they do it also because students may have trouble accessing the reading themselves. Grade 7 have loved some school-wide read alouds, and their language arts teacher does it routinely. School-wide reading time. Thank you. SWR means school-wide reading time. So what I used to call deer time in my classroom in school. So, okay, great. Thank you.
So I want to pause and talk about that for just a minute, because initially I started using read alouds for my lower level readers when I had a huge influx of refugee children in my class. I ran to my ESOL team and I said, listen, welcome to the country. You can have 6 months here, and now you have to take US history and then take a test on it, right? So I ran to my ESOL department. And I was like, I need help. What am I going to do? And they said, you need to swirl every day, because that builds fluency. So to help those kids in particular, I started using picture books and swirl. And what I found out is even it helped my ESOL kids, but it also helped my kids who were reading below grade level. But it also helped my gifted kids that I had in my AP classes, because they struggle with visual literacy. They struggle with citing specific text or specific evidence from a visual. And so this really helped them practice a skill that they were not so great at. So initially I entered this to help the kids who were lower, but what ended up happening is it helped everyone practice those different modalities. So we're gonna do a sample. So what I do to prep every lesson is create this essential question that's going to go for the whole unit, not just the not just the class period. So the question, starting my World War I, World War II, and Great Depression unit is, what is the art of war? Has anyone clarified the question before with them? Do you know the process? I'm waiting as if you can unmute yourself and tell me, but we'll just pretend you don't. So we're going to go through it. We're going to cheat a little bit. The first thing that we ask the students is, what words in that question do you have to know in order to answer it? What words in that question do you have to know in order to answer it? Type it in the chat.
They're saying art and war.
Oh, it's amazing. It's like I underlined them or something. Yes.
It's like you told them the answer.
Okay, so let's take the first word, art, and let's break it down. What does it mean? What does the word art mean?
Cynthia says, what kinds of art? Okay.
How do you define art? And then we're going to do war next, so be thinking about that.
Elizabeth says strategy, expression of something, says Tammy, artistic art, strategic art. Crystal says art can be music. Jessica says creative expression, expression of feelings, experiences, anything, art for a purpose. Lots of good answers here.
I love it. Okay, so what about war? Now think, what is the literal definition? It doesn't have to be a synonym, but what could war mean? All of the possibilities, what could war mean?
Okay, Tammy says conflict.
Okay.
Argument, Sonia says argument.
Okay.
More argument, fighting one another, engagement, how to fight, how to win. Another conflict. Sorry.
Does it have to be, I heard conflict a lot. Does it have to be violence? I'm good. I'm seeing shaking heads. No.
Cynthia says no. Tammy says no. A lot of no's. Yeah.
Okay. So when I start a unit, it is essential for me to do this, even though you got middle school, high school kids, they know what the word art and war mean, but allowing them to explore all of the different meanings helps them focus on vocabulary, but it also helps them see different kinds of things that I want them to look for when I do the read aloud. So this is an example of, I did this with a workshop, and here are the answers that they had. Several of them very similar to what you guys did. Now what I want you to do, and you could type it in the chat if you are brave and want to share. What I'd like you to do now is rewrite that question without using the words art and war. Rewrite that question without using art and war. You're going to have 60 seconds, go.
And while they're writing, I'll just catch you up with a few more comments. Sometimes there are wars of words. A war is a conflict in which force is used to settle disputes between organized parties.
Nice.
There are examples: war on poverty, war on drugs. Two sides reach, I think they mean impasse, and can no longer negotiate. Okay, so now we're getting some reworkings of what is the art of war, what is conflict.
Okay, wait. So before you read that, Joanne, what I want everyone to listen for is two things. One, did the person use any of the taboo words? And two, is the question basically the same, right? That's what we're all listening for. What did they use instead of the taboo words? And is the question about the same? Okay, Joanne, go.
Okay.
Just give me one. Give me one.
What is conflict and ways to express yourself?
All right. Thoughts about that? Did they use, I can see people's heads. So those of you who've got your cameras on, you can shake your head. Did they use the taboo words? No? Okay, good. And then let me see. And those of you who aren't using your cameras, I think you can still do the reactions. Thumbs up. Is the question basically the same? you can either shake your head yes or no or thumbs, or read the question for us one more time, Joanne. I got a thumbs up from Sue.
The first one,
The one that
what
you
is
just read.
what is conflict and ways to express yourself?
Okay. What is conflict and ways to express yourself? All right, read us another one.
How is conflict expressed? And then the next one is almost the same. How can you express a disagreement?
Okay, so I would normally take a few more minutes with this, but what I want to do is pause and go through the process one more time. You give them the question. Students identify the words that they need to clarify. Students provide the synonyms or the phrases that are similar to the meanings for the words. And then students reword the question in their own words using their head. And you've provided this bank here, this word bank for them. Now, the key to this is in this book, when we read, we're not going to read the whole thing. We're actually going to look at one page. But in Dazzle Ships, what I want them to be looking for is answers to this question. What is the art of war? What strategy do they see? What actual art do they see? What types of persuasion do they see? And then for war, I want them to look for things that imply conflict. It could be, of course, physical violence and fighting, but conflict in many of the other ways that you guys mentioned. So I use the analogy, I have to clarify the question, or it's like going on a field trip and not counting all your kids before you get back to the school, figuring out you've left a couple of them off the bus, right? I had this great lesson with my AP World History kids, and they were discussing for an hour, and at the end I asked them the question again. I said, so what did you find as it relates to economics? And they said, Miss Hatcher, there wasn't anything that relates to economics. And I was like, what are you talking about? Everything you read was about economics. And they said, well, it never one time said the word economics. And it's like, oh, I didn't clarify, I left you off the bus, and so you didn't know what you were looking for. And when they reword the question and share that, that's a way for me to kind of tell, is everybody on the bus with me? So,
okay, Joy,
yes.
Cynthia asked, so are you using, and we had some other really good responses, by the way, I'm not ignoring those, but I think she's moving on. But
Right.
Cynthia asked, so are you using the EQ to anticipate the book?
I'm using the EQ to tie everything together that's in the unit. So when I'm looking at World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II, you've got fighting and actual physical violence and conflict and militarism in World War I and World War II, but it's also got to be something that connects to the Great Depression and that kind of economic struggle. And I use this for world history. So it's kind of like the, is global conflict only something that is physical violence, or can there be social and economic conflict as well? So I want them to, and then I want them to think about, the strategy of getting yourself into and out of conflict, right? So I'm using the question to start off the unit and connect to it every single day. So now we're going to go into the book, and I want you to look for, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. This activity is called 30 seconds, and how long in total do you get? It's a trick question. It's called 30 seconds. You get 2 minutes because each segment is 30 seconds. Now, this, I'm not going to go through this particular set of instructions with you because this is designed for in-class face-to-face. All you have to remember is there are 30-second intervals. I learned this from our fine arts program manager. She said, students look, but they don't see. They look, but they don't see. Meaning they will look at your PowerPoint and they'll look at that picture, but they're not going to think about it because they're waiting for you to tell them what it means. So this is a very quick activity to use with students that they use in the art classroom to help analyze a visual. So, and you're going to get this PowerPoint. So it has all the instructions on it. This first 30 seconds, I was going to say, look at me, don't look at the screen, but I can't actually tell if you're looking at me or not. But what I want you to do is just observe the image for 30 seconds. And what I want you to be looking for are the two parts of the EQ, which are art and war. So anything on this image that you see as it relates to art or war, don't write, don't type, just look at it for 30 seconds. But then I also want you to, second thing, make a prediction about what you think the book is about. And those of you who came to Joanne and Jennifer's sessions, you can't cheat. So look at the page, look for anything that relates to art or war, and see if you can make a prediction about what the book is about. 30 seconds. I'll pull up my timer, and your 30 seconds starts now. And time. Now I want you to take 30 seconds and jot down your observations, because you weren't supposed to be jotting in that first 30 seconds. Second 30 seconds, jot down your observations about art and war and predictions. Go. You are welcome to jot them in the chat if you would like to. And time. All right. So if you saw anything in this image that relates to art, type that in the chat.
Joy, we've got lots of interesting responses. Do you want to hear some of them?
Oh, yes, that's what I'm waiting for.
I also have a barking dog in the background. So if you hear that, that'll be a bonus. Navy warfare, heroic. The trident is interesting. Maybe about ways that things are camouflaged. Britain and ties to the world.
Oh, wait, but how do we know it's Britain?
One person said the British flag.
Mm-hmm.
So,
are we tying that? So Joanne and Jennifer, you guys have to be their voices here. What are we tying the flag to? Are we tying it to art, or are we tying it to war?
one person said Great Britain controlling this world through the seas. One ship has stripes on it. It's different from the others. Colors, red, white, and blue. The zebra striped boat. Night and day, the women figure sitting on the world.
So I'm going to pause right there. What students will pick up on is all of the things that you guys just did. But part of the cognitive level that we're trying to get to, or the skill actually that we really want them to do, is not just tell us what they observe, but tell us how it connects. So if you said the British flag, I would want to know, I would make you tell me, are you connecting that to art or to war? Well, some of you might say to art because it's colors and shapes and designs and it's representative of a country, it's a symbol. Okay. Some of you might say, well, it connects to war. Why? Because the woman who it's in her lap is holding a trident, and a trident is, a weapon. So which one is right? Neither. It's just about citing your evidence and supporting your claim, right? Some people would say the camouflage is art. Some people could say it's war. When they say, well, those are battleships, I would ask them to prove that. So how would they prove that those are battleships? They would say that maybe they have guns, they are sailing in formation, all of those things. I didn't hear anybody, Joanne, did anybody pick up that the sun never sets on the British Empire? They have, the book pages have night on one side and
right.
day on the other.
They mention night and day, and they mention Britannia, so like rule Britannia. And she's sitting on the globe, which is a sign of domination as well. Someone said that. Orbs suggest world domination. Yeah.
Nice. So all of this gets them into digging into that visual literacy piece, making connections to strategy, making connections to conflict, and hopefully making predictions about the book. If you're not familiar with dazzle ships, it's a real thing during World War I. The reason I chose this book is because it is very visually appealing. It's a story that even the kids of mine who are in love with the History Channel, they don't know this story about the dazzle ships. And it's also not when we think about World War I, we think about trench warfare, and this isn't generally the focus. So it's something new that they haven't heard yet. And this first page, using predictions with this first page, is a great strategy that they will then start to use when they start reading books. Clicky click. Hello. Additionally, I like to pair this one with some documents that are primary and secondary. Of course, All Quiet on the Western Front is a secondary document. It's historical fiction, but I don't have time to read the whole thing in class, nor do I generally have a class set. So I pulled out the most juicy paragraphs from All Quiet to pair it. And this particular book has some great back matter that I did not put in there. But there are some primary source photos of the dazzle ships in the back. The next page is a fantastic overview of the beginning of World War I with a map. And the map isn't just a static map, it's a map with characters that have period dress and regional dress. So it's a great way to kind of introduce those students into a common narrative. A lot of my students, I don't know about yours, but sometimes they'll come into my world history class and don't remember, anything at all. Or they transfer you into your class and they don't have any background knowledge. So using this kind of read aloud at the beginning of the unit gives everyone a common narrative to pull from, and they'll start referring to it through the whole lesson. Okay, next book is The Poppy Lady. If you have any questions about dazzle ships or any of those activities, the 30 seconds or the clarifying the question, you can type them in there, and Joanne and Jennifer will stop me like this. Yes.
Yes, we're also inviting you to share your own favorite titles. We have a Google Doc set up so that we can share and everyone can have access to it. So I see a couple of people have shared their titles in the chat. We'll get those in the Google Doc as well. But that's a nice way to share. One of the advantages of this kind of thing is learning new titles from other teachers. So please feel free to share.
So dazzle ships I use for world history, but you can also use it for U.S. history. It does mention the United States a couple times in the book. The Poppy Lady, I needed something that talked about the domestic impact of war. And so I picked Poppy Lady, one, because there's a Georgia connection, because Moyna was at the University of Georgia. Two, she does a variety of things on the home front to support the war effort. And there are tons of images in the book that relate to other additional research and primary sources. So the EQ I use for this one is, how does the war front affect the home front? So we're not going to clarify the question, but you'd have to really hash out what war front and home front and the word affect means in context. But I did put pictures on this one of some of the back matter that includes some of the original propaganda posters, some of the photos of the knitting, and there's another great book called Knit Your Bit, if anyone has heard of that one, but it is specifically about knitting for soldiers. And I use this image because as she is rolling gauze for the Red Cross, there is a reference to knit your bit in the back. So the tasks I use for this one, and I use this one during the lesson, not to start off the lesson, but I would set up a research activity about the home front, and I'd use this book as a springboard into that. And then I want to connect that to a writing activity. We have literacy standards for social studies in grades 6 through 12. So this particular in this particular book, she writes poetry and writes letters. So I would set this up as a way for them at the end of this lesson to write a letter to a soldier, or make connection to modern wars, home fronts and war fronts, whether they be actual wars or battles like COVID. We have a lot of people that we would consider to be on the front lines right now. So I would use this book as a way to help kids make connections to conflict and change. RBG, the case of RBG versus inequality. I use this one for government. There are two pieces, two things that this book does that I really like for American government and civics, also for US history courses, because this gives a great overview of her life from when she was little and wanting to go to school and wanting an education to her time serving on the Supreme Court. But the C3 frameworks talk about developing claims and using evidence. At the top, this is the kind of grid that is the progression. So by the end of 12th grade, they should be able to identify evidence that draws directly from multiple sources and refine their claims. So this book starts off with a little tiny RBG saying, men and women of the jury, I'm going to make a case for you. And as you go through the book, it literally says things like Exhibit A, and then gives you an image of something that happened to her and an explanation of how it relates back to the argument. So as they're looking for the answer to this essential question, what freedoms are worth fighting for, they are kind of analyzing the argument that the book is trying to make. So what is the claim and what is the evidence they're using to support it? And then as they move through the book, they can analyze each argument as a way to both look at her life through history and also work on those thinking skills. And there's a variety of other activities you could do with this. You could do the 30-second analysis. With one of the last pages has the Supreme Court, and then there's different icons on the steps that represent different time periods of her life. So that's a great 2-page spread to do the 30-second activity, asking how the illustrator supports the text with the images. You can have them do some chronology. Like I said, it starts when she was very young and experiencing anti-Semitism on up until today, in addition to the argument analysis. This is also a good one to do annotation with. So now what I want to do is kind of go a little bit faster. Those are the 3 main examples of ways that I've used read alouds in the classroom to start off the unit during the unit as kind of a research piece. These 2 books I absolutely love. I love Maya Lin and all of her architecture. And of course, you know, she is the architect of the Vietnam War. Joanne. She has a lot of great questions to set up this reading aloud, this Maya Lin book, which is about the creation of the memorial. And then some great questions about Rolling Thunder, which is how we remember the people who were on it. So memorials are, of course, about remembering important people, important things. And so getting them to think about who do we remember, why do we remember, is a great way to introduce those kind of topics. I stole this slide from Jennifer. There's so many books, you guys. I did not know this story about Jackie Robinson, about him going into the military and experiencing segregation and kind of being kicked out of the military for refusing to move off the bus before he finally went into baseball. So it's a great look at a character that they're probably familiar with, but maybe not familiar with that particular story. And we are going to have a rush of books starting now. Here's Knit Your Bit. Knit Your Bit on the front cover and the back cover have tons of primary source photographs that you can use. And you can also pair Knit Your Bit with the Poppy Lady, because they are both about the domestic impact. One is Knit Your Bit has some issues of gender in there. The brother's like, well, I don't want to knit, that's for girls. And so by the end, him and his friends are all knitting. But that's a great personal story there. That Dabbling Union Army cow for Civil War, it's one of those that has that moo, like at the end of the page, Dabbling Union Army cow says moo. Well, even adults in my workshops, after about the third page, when I get to the end, every adult goes moo. So it's a great hook, and it gives you a lot about the geography. It's from it's a Union Army cow, right? So it's them traveling through the South, and it gives you some great geography. It gives you the life of a soldier through the eyes of this cow. And speaking of through the eyes, this Ruby Bridges book on the bottom right is not one that I would read. It's not a story cover to cover. It's Ruby Bridges wrote this book. It has a lot of great primary source photographs in it. A lot of, everything is her experience written by her. So I would use excerpts from it in the class. But it's a beautifully done book. And then there's some additional ways that I've used literature before teaching, during teaching, and after teaching. I think my favorite thing to do is to start off with a picture book in the unit, and then tell them at the beginning of the unit, at the end, you're going to have to create your own picture book. So I model it there. Then they're looking through all of the documents, all of my direct instruction. What they're looking for is characters and setting so that they can do their story at the end. So that's a suggestion I would say. If you're going to have them do create their own picture book at the end of the unit, tell them at the beginning of the unit that they're going to do it, because then the information they pull, it gives you a better product at the end. So for economics, any econ teachers out there? Yes, no, maybe so. Uncle Jed's Barbershop is about a family.
Yes. I'm sorry. There's a yes. Yes.
Yay. So Uncle Jed's Barbershop is set during the Great Depression. Westlandia, if you've ever done, at the beginning of the year, I would always ask my economics kids to create their own, you've crashed on an island and you have to create your own civilization. So what they're trying to do is, determine market structure and competition and things like that. So the book Westlandia is similar in that they are creating a new society and they go through that whole process. So I would pair that with that beginning of the year activity. My Rows and Piles of Coins is about saving and spending choices, and it is a very beautiful book. And I've seen several of these read aloud on YouTube, just so you know. For world history, the harmonica is a very sad story. It's about the Holocaust. A Single Shard is early Korean. This is not a picture book. It's by Linda Supark, and it's a Newbery winner. I used Graphic Universe has a collection of graphic novels about early societies, and it's very diverse. So this particular one, Sunjata, is the one that was stolen from my room most often, because it's the story of the Lion King. It would turn itself back up eventually, but every year it was stolen at least once. But they have West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, they have Olmecs, Aztecs, they have all of the European mythologies, they have China, Korea, Japan. They have a really diverse collection of graphic novels about early society, early mythology, early religious roots. And then Persepolis, I have used excerpts of this in the classroom. I never had a class set, so it was like kids would check it out and read it and bring it back. But I would use a couple of pages, similar to how we did the 2-page analysis for Dazzle Ships. I would take 2 pages, and they would analyze the 2 pages of the graphic novel, and it was always a hook, and then they would want to check out the book from me and read it. But Persepolis is Iranian Revolution.
Joy.
Yes. Yeah.
At a couple of points, we had some good input. Yes, about the economics. We had economic teachers in the room, and also Jennifer talks about how she uses Through My Eyes with video interviews of Ruby Bridges, even with first graders.
Oh yeah.
And I think that pairing really is powerful, and the interviews actually bring it to an adult level too. So very, very moving.
And one of the and don't let me forget, have I shared any yet that have? I don't think I have. Okay, good. So there are some that have those that are connected to true stories that you can show in addition to the book that make them more powerful. Okay. So for world history, world geography, the Great Kapok Tree, that is a really awful picture. I'm sorry about that. The Great Kapok Tree is about the Brazilian rainforest. Dear Primo, I love that book because it is cousins, one who lives in the US and one who lives in Mexico, and they write to each other about their lives. This is how I play. This is how I play. This is what we eat. This is what I eat. It is a great way to compare cultures. And so I would read this book to my kids. And in a world history setting, I might take 2 regions and then say, you know what, you have 2 cousins, you choose the 2 places and recreate this book based on where each person lives. So if you're doing comparative geography, power structures, participation in government, that is a great way to address that and create a really great product for the kids to do with you. The Red Pencil is a book of poetry about a little girl who gets a pencil in the Sudan, and that's by Andrea Davis Pinkney, who will be at the High Museum in Atlanta this summer. We're really excited about that. And also she's coming to our Picturing History 2021, I hope, maybe. About elephants in a zoo after the dropping of the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Planting the Trees of Kenya. This is great for world geography. And there is, Joanne, there is a video about
Wangari Maathai.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There are several picture books about her. This is one of our favorites. Yeah.
And then 14 Counts for America is great to tie U.S. history into the world and tie world history into the United States. Carmen Agrediti writes about this tribe in Africa who finds out what happened to the United States during 9/11, and they collect cows to send us their way to do something as a relief effort. And then A Long Walk to Water, also not a picture book, but it's a short read, but it sparks a lot of civic action. I'm sure everybody's heard of A Long Walk to Water. But hopefully Linda Sue Park will be visiting us soon as well. Some more world history, world geography. I have a world history and econ background, so you're getting a lot of those. One Plastic Bag is about recycling. Give a Goat, similarly, all 3 of these are civic action. Giving a Goat is by the organization Heifer International. And I think, Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of their books, I think that you can download them, an electronic version for free in your classroom to use in your classroom.
That's probably true. I haven't checked it out. I have to have a physical copy when I love a book. So, yeah.
And then The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, about coming back to his country and creating wind farms to provide energy. I couldn't leave these out. All Different Now is about the celebration of Juneteenth. So it's a great one for U.S. history, Civil War, Reconstruction era. Molly Bannicky, I love because I had never seen a book about an indentured servant. But Molly Bannicky is an indentured servant who marries a former slave. And did you give away the ending for that, Joanne?
Yes.
Okay. So she is the great grandmother of.
Benjamin Banneker.
Yeah.
And their name changes over time. But we do have a couple more comments about some of the books. Someone mentioned Shen's Tricycle. I'm aware of that one too, which is like the Faithful Elephants book. It really tugs at your heart. Of course, A Thousand Cranes, that book about, I've forgotten the rest of the title, but you know the one I'm talking about the atomic bomb. And Crystal says, I love Faithful Elephants. A great movie to pair it with is Zoo, about elephants in Britain in 1941-ish. I don't know that movie, so now I'm going to be looking for that.
We are grateful, Joanne, I'm going to mispronounce this, but I think it's O Shali Haliga.
Something like that.
We have standards that want students to kind of analyze the contributions of American Indians both then and now. And so Joanne found this book, and one of the things I love about it is this is the Cherokee people today and how they celebrate Thanksgiving today. And it's a great book. I saw in your standards a lot of information about recognizing the indigenous peoples in the region. So I know you don't have Cherokee, but it's a great model to use, and you can have your kids go out and do that research and create a We Are Grateful book for your region. And then Freedom Summer by Deborah Wiles is a great look at segregation in the South, and an award winner. There are two that I picked out that is specific to, there's a lot of these that are civic action, but Joan Trumpower Mulholland was one of the freedom riders, and she is pictured in the sit-in, one of the famous sit-in photos where the young lady's head's turned and there's sugar dumped in her hair. So that's a great book to talk about civil rights and her work. And then Follow the Moon Home is about loggerhead turtles, but it's about kids who go through kind of that process of civic action and finding out what the rules and laws are to help save the loggerhead baby turtles when they hatch. And there's an anchor chart in it on like the first 3 pages. Okay, so where can you find other books? Several of you have come to the previous sessions. I still have the picture from 2018 up there. Everything except for the most current year is available to you. So 2019 will be available as soon as 2020 comes out. And I put the link over here for you. And then our Georgia Council for the Social Studies has recommended book titles K-12. Our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade is one U.S. history course divided over 3 years. So if you're looking for great picture books to use in high school U.S. history, you can look at our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade titles. They're not all picture books, like Fever's on there, and it's not a picture book, but there are some great titles that you can use. Dangerous Jane, seen this one? I'm asking like you're just going to answer me with your voice. So, oh yes, thank you, with your head shaking. See, it's nonverbal communication. I got you. So Dangerous Jane is Jane Addams in the Hull House, right? Well, we all know that story, but I did not know that she went overseas to help soldiers during the war. And she would medically treat people regardless of whose side they were on. And so when she came back, she was branded, she was kind of boycotted because she helped injured soldiers of the enemy. So this is and was branded Dangerous Jane. So this is a great story about her that I had never heard before. And I always love new twists. So I put this with this Why Do We Want to Read Aloud bullet points slide here, because when I taught high school, similar to what Joanne mentioned in her session 2 days ago, when her evaluator came in and said, "Oh, I'll come back when you're teaching," when she was reading a book aloud to kids. I really had to start off explaining to my administration why I was doing a read aloud with my kids, right? Because if you're in high school and you are holding up a kid's book and somebody walks by and looks at that, um, unless they are familiar with it, they're going to think that you're not on task. Let's just say it like that. So some of the reasons that we want to use it is to stimulate language development, um, like the doors, windows, and sliding glass doors that we've talked about all week long. I put these slides in here, and these are actually from Joanne because she is the Read Aloud guru. But she compiled this list so that teachers can kind of have that ammunition ready when they're writing their lessons and they mention they're going to read aloud to the kids. So this is from Stevens Lane's book, and I think this one is In Defense of the Read Aloud, isn't it, Joanne? I believe. Well,
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I'm nodding and saying yes. Yes.
oh, uh,
Let me jump in for
yes.
just a minute, Joy, because we're having an interesting discussion in the chat. One is one line of it is talking about high schoolers and middle schoolers sometimes having lost the love of reading, and the read aloud can actually be used to kind of revive that. So there's some good conversation about that, about having that, wanting them to need to love reading and stories again. So just wanted to throw that.
That happened to my child, who is now 15. He absolutely, once he got into middle school, he didn't really care about reading anymore. He was consuming books faster than I could get them for him in elementary. But then he hit middle school and nothing until his 7th grade teacher started reading aloud to the kids. And I asked him, "Who's your favorite teacher?" And he said her. And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "Because she reads to us." And then he has now started to pick up reading again. So more ammunition for you. It's all about comprehension. It's a great literacy integration. I don't understand why leaders don't see the benefit of teaching, of how we can teach literacy in the social studies classroom. I had one of my teachers call me the other day and say they're pulling all of the kids out of my class because they didn't do well in their reading and writing tests, and so they're going to take them out of my geography class. He said, even though they can see in my lessons, I'm explicitly teaching them reading and writing skills and comprehension and vocabulary. So, all of these things together make a powerful argument for literacy integration in the social studies content. And there are a couple of more titles here. This particular link at the bottom is from Lester Laminak's article, and that is free to the public. Read often and well. And Separate is Never Equal. I see a couple of heads out there. Have you seen Separate is Never Equal by Duncan Tunatu? So this is the story of Sylvia Mendez and her family's fight to desegregate schools in California. It did not go to the Supreme Court, but her family won that battle, but it is the precursor for Brown versus Board of Education. Sylvia Mendez came to NCSS in Austin this past year and talked about how her case is something that they used as part of the argument for Brown versus Board. So it's a great look at desegregation from the perspective of Latino children in California.
Joy?
Yeah.
Just following up with more great conversation in the chat. Sammy says, my kids love for me to read aloud because they feel they can take in more of the story. She teaches 9 through 12. Yes. And then reading aloud is such good modeling for how to get them to learn about anything. And we have another passionate plea that we stop cutting elementary librarians, stop telling students they can only check out library books that the teacher is requesting them to read, or making them read so much for school assignments they have no time for free choice reading. And we agree with you. So and again, Sue recognizes that she's losing students for lit and math supplements and a job coaching class. So Uh, so a similar kind of situation to what you're talking about. They're cutting out social studies in order to add more language arts and math, even though we could be building them through social studies.
Well, and what baffles me is they'll do these things and then they don't get the result they want, and then they just do it again. And it's like, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. So I went to my administration in advance and let them know what I was doing and let them know the background. And I will be honest and tell you that I did not know what I know now. Um, Joanne and Jennifer have been great in kind of expanding my book list. I used a lot of Dr. Seuss, and I'm a sci-fi fan, so I used a lot of sci-fi. But these books are a phenomenal way to build literacy skills, and reading aloud. Students need to hear fluent readers, and they need to hear fluent readers stumble so that they know it's okay too. And so a read aloud is the perfect way to do that. So I'm going to just, yes.
Joy, very quickly, Neil shared some really provocative and interesting titles that he uses when he starts the Africa unit. So I think there's some good information there for teachers who teach that.
And there have been a ton of books about human environment interaction in Africa as of late in the last couple of notable trade book sessions. I've included these in here for you because when we're thinking about distance learning and we're thinking about how do I read aloud to my kids in a distance learning format, one of the things that publishers have done is kind of relaxed some of the copyright. Well, they've relaxed some of the rules on you reading aloud to your kids. So this is how you would create a YouTube video and post it for your kids in a way that is friendly to the publishers. So I'm not going to go through every step. It's pretty self-explanatory. It literally says step 1, 2, 3, 4. The most important thing you want to remember on 6 is once you post it, make sure you select private. And that way you can select the people that can view this. Other people can't search for it or anything like that. That way you can literally read the whole book to your kids aloud. You could send it to them as a YouTube link, select who can watch it, and then you're still in the land of copyright okayness. Before we close out, I want you to remember that you matter, that it's not just that someone is reading aloud. And I think Joanne brought up this question, or was it Jennifer? Did you bring up the question, Joanne? Where you were?
Usually do, yes.
So in Joanne's session a couple of days ago, she said, what read alouds do you remember and why do you remember them? You remember them not just because somebody read aloud, but someone who was important to you, a teacher, a parent. So I would not just take somebody else's video and give it to my kids. It's important for them to hear you and see you to make it more personal. My gosh, we're at the end. So this is the feedback form that we use to make our presentations better. You can scan that QR code with your phone. I think Jennifer or Joanne's going to put the link in the chat. But I will pause for questions, comments, or outrageous objections. I haven't had an outrageous objection, but I'm open to them.
Joy, you actually had several questions as you were presenting that we didn't get to. Elizabeth was asking about how to access the book lists. I think she's talking about, once you get to the GCSS site or the NCSS site, where do you find them?
I have the link that I put in the handout that Joe's going to send you and that I put in the screen goes directly to children's literature. But if you go to the GCSS website and you click on more information, children's literature is like the third link down, and they're all right there.
Okay, so Elizabeth, if that wasn't what you were talking about, shoot us a different chat. And then someone else asked about suggestions for how to use poetry.
Oh, yes. We actually have some written out instructions on bio poems. Jennifer, if you'll write that down, I'll send that to Joe as well.
Yes.
But I'm wondering if you mean how to use like the red pencil, which is a book of poetry.
Yeah,
Or,
I responded in the chat to that, but yeah, I didn't know if we had time to kind of go down that path. But several books that we've mentioned, and I mentioned another one, The Undefeated, are in free verse. So there are ways to incorporate, certainly ways to incorporate poetry into our social studies read alouds.
Okay, and the last one I saw that I don't think we got to was talking about faithful elephants and how, like you said, it was so sad. How do you deal with that with the students, with it being such a heavy topic?
I think it is different from talking about the Holocaust, but it is similar in that they're horrific things that you can't whitewash history. You read a book like that to your kids, and then you allow them to discuss it with you so that you can monitor how they're feeling about it. Faithful Elephants was not with me when I was in the classroom still. But using different things like mouse, it was just, I had to assess the kids in that class and determine what their mindset was and whether or not they were ready for it. And so what I used to address that particular topic was based on, so sometimes first period would get a different book than second period would. But just preface it and make sure that they have the room and the space to talk about it and how they feel about it.
Yep. They'll remember it too, because it made them feel something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Neil mentioned Terrible Things, which is a book I also think is very powerful, An Allegory of the Holocaust. It's by E. Bunting. That's a wonderful book. There's another one whose title is not going to come to me in time, but there are a number of Holocaust picture books that are very profound and moving.
Joanne, you emailed me today and about one of the titles.
Yeah, there's if you're working with Linda C. Parks, A Long Walk to Water, she's now written a picture book version of. It's actually an extension of the story. It's called Nya's Long Walk, NYAS Long Walk, a step at a time, and it's in picture book format. So if you wanted to use it at the beginning of a lesson where you might not be able to use the whole book, A Long Walk to Water, it's a great start. It's illustrated by Brian Pinkney. Wonderful book.
And because I love them, I do a session called Seussical Social Studies. So I can't not share with you the titles. I know several of you use them probably, but 5 titles for high school social studies that are phenomenal are You're the Turtle, which is about government and governance. But an easy tie into world history too, when you're talking about empire expansion and conflict and rebellion. The Butter Battle book, which is U.S. history. It's, Dr. Seuss was writing about the Cold War during that time period and the difference between the fight between democracy and communism. Horton Hears a Who, which is a lot about civic action and world history and minority groups. The Sneetches, which is, the haves and the have-nots of pretty much any part of history. And if I started off the year in world history reading the Sneetches, I could go to any time period and any unit later on and say, who are the star belly Sneetches and who are the plain belly Sneetches? And they would just have all kinds of discussions about it. And the Lorax. The Lorax is probably my all-time favorite. It is very adaptable to every kind of economics unit, whether you're talking about microeconomics or macroeconomics or, fundamentals, market structure, business organization, but it's also during the time period of the robber barons in U.S. history. So the one story is basically a robber baron, and all of the you got all the human environment interaction in there, and yeah, those 5 great books to use.
Okay, so maybe some quick final comments. Joe says, love the Butter Battle book. Cindy suggests The Water Princess about scarcity of water, which is a new title for me, so I can't wait to explore it. Cynthia says, thank you for addressing the question of hard to hear books, and they've had to work through that in a book by Julius Lester called Slave Ship to Freedom.
Yeah.
Can you type the 5 titles? I assume you mean the Dr. Seuss books. So
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Lorax.
I've been putting those in the Google document.
Okay,
So
if you'll go.
they're there. And another great one that I was just introduced to is the What Pets Should I Get? And it's great for econ because it talks about scarcity. You know, they can have to make choices and support their choices.
Yeah, they could just turn that into what car can I get?
Yep.
All right, you guys, thanks for joining us. If you think of any fun and exciting things, feel free to share. Joe, I sent you the PowerPoint and handout for today.
Yep, I've got it loaded on the website. I did notice that the one you sent me did not have the personal family photos.
This is correct.
But it was noted as for distribution, so I thought that that's what you wanted.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I wasn't sure how I felt about sending around my kid photos, so.
No, that's completely understandable. I just noticed that right away, and I also noticed that. I said, no, that makes complete sense. But I'll just double check just in case it was a last minute change of heart either way. So I will ask. I know you guys have referenced it across multiple sessions, the building out of these book lists. I think you guys were trying to pull. Were you guys able? I'm thinking like Joanne and Jennifer's sessions. Were you able to pull everything out of the chat room? Do you need any records of chats? Because my final question is there any way, once all of it's been compiled, to get a list back? I would love to have one book list that was the K2, 3, 5, 6, 12 that was talked about across all of these sessions.
Yes, we've got a running list going from each one, and then we can just kind of, I guess, Joanne and I haven't talked about all of it yet, but I'm sure we can compile it and get it back to you one way or the other.
Yep.
And the teachers can still access it now using the link. If there's something they want to go on and add to it, they can go on and continue adding. And we're not worried about the titles and all that. I mean, the authors, we can add that in later if we just have the title.
And that was one, I had access to that same document. I'm just wondering, like at some point, I was assuming you guys would kind of close that up and kind of tidy it up. And instead of just continuing to check back when you hit that point, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to just kind of share back so I knew that you'd done whatever due diligence you wanted to do with the list on that.
Sure.
Awesome. Does anybody have any last questions on the record for the Georgia DOE Social Studies Department?
Well, we have lots of thank yous for Joy and wonderful session, and this was awesome. So thank you very much.
I hope the EQ activity wasn't too out there. And I probably should have said it's kind of like coding the text, which is kind of an introduction into what I would have my AP kids do. But
Neil says, thank you. This was one of the best PDs. Yay.
Yay.
And I will vouch for Neil that Neil's attended a bunch of these. So this isn't his like first session. So
yay. We'll take that feedback as a real positive.
Well, let me give you the formal thank you on behalf of all of our participants, not only today, but Tuesday and Wednesday, for the Georgia DOE Social Studies team giving up valuable lunch hours to come work with us. So thank you. I could not do the work I'm doing without the support of my friends and colleagues from across the country. So I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks for showing up.